If you thought the situation with the Nintendo Switch 2 and its price was as bad as it could get, you were wrong. To be fair, I was too. It turns out that Breath of the Wild, that game that came out in 2017, its Switch 2 edition, if you want it with all of the DLC, will cost you $90. $90 for an 8-year-old game. And that is primarily because it does not include the DLC for the game in its Switch 2 edition, the nice Switch 2 box. It's not a complete edition, it is just Breath of the Wild plus the upgrade part of it included. And considering that the upgrade of it is just that it's running on better hardware, and when we look at emulation, it just takes a person to put out a patch for 60 FPS on Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, I'm gonna go ahead and say that the amount of work necessary to have the games run at 60 frames per second is not very high. But Nintendo are trying to find a way for, if you did the math, charge you more for Breath of the Wild today than they did when it released, with minimal changes and effort. The fact that this news comes the same week that Sony has announced that the PlayStation 5 is actually increasing in price after 6 years in some territories, I think you can see a trend forming. But that doesn't change the one question that remains. Why is this happening and what is going to come of it? How did we go from the Player's Choice Wind Waker at $20 in the same console generation of the GameCube to Breath of the Wild increasing in price 8 years later? And once again, with minimal changes. This is almost like if Nintendo had sold you Super Mario 64 on the Wii Virtual Console for $60. And unfortunately, there is a lot to dig into. And in this video, we're going to cover the following things. Number one, why companies are doing this and the different ways that they are doing it. Number two, how it goes against everything that we've ever known about the industry itself and how prices work in it. Number three, how this actually explains why Nintendo has raised the price of their games to $90. And small spoiler alert, it's not going to stop. If they follow this plan, it's not going to stop and it's going to get worse. I'm really proud of the third chapter of this video, but we need the other ones before that, sorry. Hey, in the worst case, there's chapters down below. A small mini chapter on why this is generally a bad practice, but especially for Nintendo. It's just diabolical. Most important part of it all, what we need to do to stop it. So hi, I'm Mug. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. It's really nice to see you. You're looking great, by the way. Remember that if you enjoyed the video, hitting the like button means that more people can end up watching it, helps the channel grow and all of that stuff. And if you enjoy in-depth commentary and essays on the video game industry, as well as news, reviews, previews, and retrospectives, you can think about subscribing. You don't have to do it now. Let me earn your subscription first. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, to truly highlight how terrible what Nintendo is doing is, we need to take a small detour and talk about overall trends in the industry. I mentioned in the intro that we used to have things like Player's Choice, Platinum Hits, or more recently things like Nintendo Selects. We used to have games that would drop in price to a standard of $20 or so because they had already sold a ton and they were great at kind of marketing what a console was about. They served as excellent value proposals for people who were jumping into a new console. Over time, that sort of changed from the greatest hit, at least specifically in the case of Nintendo, into games that were underperforming. They decided to never lower the price on their great performing games, the ones that sell a lot, and instead lower the price on the ones that didn't, which business-wise makes a whole lot more sense, but from the perspective of customers, makes us sad. Now, over time, as video games have gotten more expensive and more complicated, in many cases, not because anybody asked for it, but it's what the companies wanted to do, and yes, I am primarily thinking about Sony and their first-party games when I say that. These companies that ultimately want not just to fund the next very expensive game, but also generate enough profit to keep the shareholders happy, needed to make more money off of each individual super expensive game. This is why The Last of Us has been released approximately 57 times. However, for a while there, the position of the industry versus the customer was that they needed to add enough value to the product in order for us to want to buy it again, or for people who were buying it for the first time to perceive it as a great value, a great deal to jump into something that a lot of people had already experienced. This meant that games were remastered to a higher or lesser degree of effort, but very often better performance, sometimes just upping the resolution or really reworking a lot of the graphics on them. New gameplay modes, new options, director's commentary, all sorts of things. And for a while there, a lot of those sorts of upgrades were actually free if you owned the original game. Slowly that upgrade process was phased out in exchange for charging people a small fee, normally around $10, but still trying to pack in as much new content to make that a worthwhile investment. And I think that overall, everybody considered it a bit of a win-win. People who already had the game would get an upgraded version either for free or a very low price, but with new stuff that really warranted going back to it and wanting to play it again. Brand new people who had never played the original got a pretty good deal, normally at a reduced price of around $50 on a game that was now more complete and more feature-packed than ever. And the companies making them could double down and for a fraction of the cost of making a new game, get more money primarily by selling it to newer customers who hadn't played it before, and also promoting maybe their new console, like a PlayStation 5. All of this follows the logic that we've had forever, that the older that something becomes, the less worth it is. It's kind of a pretty universal thing. It doesn't matter if we're talking about tech or cars. Normally, things lose value. And so they needed to justify keeping the price up and giving people a reason, a real reason to spend money on it again or to play it again. This overall idea of things being more valuable the day they release and then losing value over time is so common that right now one of the bigger problems we have in the industry is that they are raising the prices of games without telling us by selling us early access. And not like the Steam early access, the finished version of the game. So they're like, the game releases on the 18th of April, but if you pay $20 for the deluxe edition, you can play from the 12th. That is at how much of a premium the whole idea of the launch window of a game and FOMO of it is. And while some of you will rightfully say that Nintendo is the company that has least played by those rules historically, that doesn't mean they are immune to it or have never done it. Of course they have discounted games, of course they've had sales, and of course they understand how things work. And Nintendo has decided to throw all of that out the window and say, we are going to keep charging the same amount for things no matter how old they are, and actually we're going to charge more, and we are not going to add anything meaningful at all. We believe that the value of this experience stands tall just as it is 8 years later. Now look, I think that there is an interesting conversation to be had on if something like a movie or a game or an album loses value over time, even if that is the way that things have worked forever. There's a lot of stuff that has changed over the years. Things aren't being discounted at stores anymore to make room for more stock. Most things are digital. But that's a very complex conversation for another day. I think that what matters here is that Nintendo themselves set these rules and have followed them for many, many years. And to just throw them out the window and go against the grain of the entire industry looking to change it is obviously going to make people angry because people don't like change, especially when it's change that actively harms their value and their experience as a customer. Minimum effort for maximum potential reward. And they're doing this with something that has never been attempted before. Not in video games, pretty much ever, which is to make their games the most luxury product possible. Even high-end fashion goes on sale when the season changes and the new collection arrives, but not Nintendo games. Those retain their value forever, apparently. Hubris really will be the downfall of everything, huh? But we haven't gotten to the insidious part yet, because I really believe that this is just the start. And if you're afraid of video games becoming luxuries that you might be priced out of, that people who love, grew up on, and continue to invest in this are going to just not be able to participate anymore because of prices, get ready. Now look, on this channel, I really pride myself on doing due diligence and proper investigation into a lot of things, and packaging all of that into something that's entertaining. I hesitated on making a video about this because I thought people would think I'm content farming Nintendo or something. I still thought it was an incredibly important topic, but what really pushed me ahead to make this video is this. In all of Nintendo's talks about upgrading Switch 1 games and how those are going to be playable on Switch 2, and all of their conversations about the upgrade packs and what they include, there is one glaring omission of a game: Mario Kart 8. The best-selling Switch 1 game and one of the best-selling games of all time. The Switch 1 game that most people own in the world is not getting any sort of upgrade, free or paid for. And you might have already said, well, that's obvious. It's because they're releasing Mario Kart World. They don't want Mario Kart 8 to compete with it, which already presents a very interesting question. So their games are timeless and retain their value until they release a sequel at which the previous game, it doesn't depreciate its value, become more accessible, become a budget experience for people to jump in before the next big thing. No, it has to die. It has to disappear. But I think there's something a lot worse. I think that when Nintendo gave us all of that public relations speak about the value of Mario Kart World and why it justifies itself at $90, what they were really thinking of is that if they were to continue selling Mario Kart 8 on the Switch 2, they would have to sell the base game for $60, the expansion pass for $30, and the upgrade for $10. They would have to outprice Mario Kart World, because as we've seen with Breath of the Wild, they wouldn't do Mario Kart 8 Complete Edition, and that would also be bad for business. Imagine if on day one of the Switch 2, you had a Mario Kart 8 Ultimate, the most Mario Kart ever, essentially, a game that has been iterated on for 11 years, priced at $50 with all of this content, and next to it, Mario Kart World. So the next possible option for them was, okay, we sell Mario Kart 8 for $100 and Mario Kart World for $110, because that way you clearly signify to people who are at the store buying it or who are looking at it on the digital storefront that the $110 one is the new fancy one and the $100 one is the old one. And we're throwing around hundreds of dollars like they're nothing in this conversation at this point. And Nintendo decided that wasn't good for business, so instead, they're just going to sell Mario Kart World at the same price that it would cost you to get Mario Kart 8, no upgrade though. And you might have already caught on with two of the very big problems with this, of just how anti-consumer and dangerous for the future of the industry this is. The anti-consumer part is that there are 70 million people on the planet with Mario Kart 8 on the Switch. And if they were offering a basic upgrade in performance or graphics to all of those people on the Switch 2, I bet it would be very enticing for a lot of them to upgrade. They might get the Switch 2, play Mario Kart 8, and then say, hey, maybe we should play Mario Kart World. It would be a great thing, a great celebration of the tremendous success of Mario Kart 8 to offer all of these people an upgraded version of it for your new console. But no, they are not doing that because it would conflict with Mario Kart World. It makes sense. They want to sell the game, and they especially want to sell that bundle that comes with the $500 version of the Switch 2 and Mario Kart World, but it still leaves a pretty sour taste in my mouth. The dangerous part of it is that when we look at the conflicting wishes of the industry, at least represented by Nintendo, they want to keep making money off of their games for years and years and years, possibly in perpetuity, before, as we established, by updating them and adding value to them, and now just by having them exist. But then what happens when you want to make a new game? What happens when you want to release a sequel? Well, Nintendo has already kind of shown their hand with that. You either have to kill off the previous game, or what they seem to be gambling towards, which is just raise the price. If the previous game plus its DLC would add up to this amount, well, the new game should be that price. Mario Kart 8 plus DLC, $90. Mario Kart World, $90 plus DLC, $120. So then Mario Kart 10 is gonna cost, yeah, you see where we're headed. That is really the only way that they can accomplish what they're looking for, which is to have their cake and eat it too. To have it so that their games continue to be sold for the same price forever, while still releasing new games that they need to signify to people are worth even more because they're newer. Essentially saying things never lose value in the Nintendo world. Time passing doesn't make things lose anything, but because we made something that's newer that is worth more. And every other major publisher right now is looking at what Nintendo is doing, and they're thinking about how many times they have added additional content or tried to remaster or even remake their games to justify selling it to customers, of finding ways to make profit off of a project, and they are salivating at the idea that this will work out for Nintendo and that maybe one day they could get away with copying them. And if that cycle continues, we are going to be priced out of our hobby incredibly quickly. What is even worse, as a side note, is that when I was looking up if there was any information about Mario Kart 8 for the Switch 2, it seemed that in most places regarding forums, Reddit, comments, things like that, people were happy to see Mario Kart 8 disappear because it's already an 11-year-old game, let it die, let the sequel come out. But that feels so wrong when you look at how many other games Nintendo is supporting with updates and wants their value to continue over time, and the fact that Mario Kart 8 is the most sold Switch game. It's the one most people have. It's such an easy slam dunk of goodwill to just give the tiniest little update to just show, hey, like, it still exists. And like, I get it. Of course it competes with Mario Kart World because Mario Kart 8 Complete is a fantastic game. But they're not just pretending that it doesn't exist. They're actively trying to bury it while charging us $90 for an 8-year-old game anyways. Now, here's a mini point, mini chapter, if you will. I do want to give credit where it's due. Even if we have never asked companies to spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on cutting-edge tech and super realistic graphics and all of these things, the companies that have invested in that and have spent hundreds of millions of dollars producing video games, they have sunk so much money into it that it makes sense that they are trying to make more money off of it. Not just to fund the next projects, but to make their business profitable overall. Now, don't misinterpret me as defending Sony, but they have lost a lot of money because they're stupid, because they invested in things like Concord and 11 other live service games that are pretty much destined to fail. And no, we're not going to talk about Marathon. But in that constant loss of money, I can respect the decision to take a bunch of games that you have in your backlog that are amazing and tweaking them, reworking them, adding value as they have done in the past, and reselling them for a fraction of the price, or more accurately, fishing for new customers that see it as a great value proposition. I would respect it more if it were also accompanied by brand new games, which we don't seem to be getting many of from companies like Sony, but I think it makes sense overall, and I think that we as customers have agreed that it's a pretty okay deal. We're even happy with it a lot of the time. Nintendo is not just not adding anything to a lot of the games that they are updating for the Switch 2, they haven't made mistakes. Nintendo's been doing fantastic. Financially speaking, they're not in a hole. They don't need to do this in order to fund their next game. They are essentially doing this because they can. It doesn't matter how much I dig into the numbers of Nintendo, how many insider reports I can find. They haven't really reported a loss on a game since the Wii U. They are doing this because they want to protect themselves in the future in order to guarantee, to set the stage, to make as much money as possible in the years to come. They were already kind of positioning themselves as the Apple of gaming, and now they're taking it as literal as they can. All right, we've highlighted a lot of the dangers of this and just how bad it can be, and I hope that you followed along and you kind of see my point. A lot of these decisions are insulting to the customer overall. They think way too highly of themselves and their games while still wanting you to know that these games are worth less than the new ones. Please pay more for the new ones. It is just overall incredibly insulting to the customer, and it is trying to set a precedent for the future that really has the prices of video games skyrocket out of control as we move towards what seems at this point like an inevitable upcoming global recession. It is pretty bad, and it is actually pricing people out. So what can we do about it? Well, every single day I see people online saying that it doesn't matter how much noise we make, how much we complain about something, the casuals are still going to make the Switch 2 or any other product that has anti-consumer practices involved in it successful regardless. And I want to start off by saying that's not true. and it's less true every day. We know that Nintendo internally panicked when seeing people on the streams complaining and saying to drop the price because they had never been involved in this sort of scandal. They thought they could just get away with everything. And we know that companies like Nintendo or Sony or Xbox, whoever, do have to react to what the market demands if the market is unified. And I think that the market can be more unified today than ever because of those circumstances. That global recession means that people are going to value their money and their time more than before because they're going to have less disposable income and less free time. So they're going to be paying more attention to the details. They're going to be watching more videos covering things like that. They're going to be more involved in the discussions around it and be more informed on it. And therefore, the bottom line of the companies making these decisions will see itself more affected. But really, before we reach the feel-good moment of the video so that you can leave here feeling really hopeful about things, I think that it's important to remind people that this has worked in the past already. When the Xbox One was announced as an always online console that gave you a digital license that was non-transferable for your games, meaning that you couldn't share the video games you bought, Sony famously tweaked their E3 presentation of the PlayStation 4 in 24 hours to include the now iconic clip of how to share games on PS4, where they simply handed a disc to each other. A direct response to all of the backlash that Xbox One received. Make no mistake that Sony would have loved to force people to keep their games as a license and not be able to share them. That meant more money for them. But they didn't do it because they saw how people reacted to the Xbox One and they decided to take the opposite route. And the result of that is still being felt today in the fact that you can still share games. And little by little, we're even capable of sharing digital games. That was a turning point where the massive amount of backlash that Microsoft received changed the course of video game history. It happened because of two things. We criticized and boycotted Microsoft, and we cheered and rewarded Sony. The positions could have been flipped. It has nothing to do with the companies, and all of these companies have traded blows in competition over and over again. And I mention this because as customers, we have a certain responsibility of not just making our voices heard and boycotting these sorts of things, but of rewarding people who give us the things we want. While some people are looking to see how much they can charge for an 8-year-old game, there are people out there charging you $60 for a fantastic game and constantly updating it with more and more free content that makes it worthwhile to come back and play it just because of that at no additional cost. I'm thinking of games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 adding its hardcore mode, Baldur's Gate 3 with its latest update and all of the new subclasses. I'm thinking experiences of the indie realm, be that things like Schedule 1, which right now is incredibly popular, AA games like Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 or Stellar Blade from last year, and yes, AAA games as well. As this channel continues to grow and I can afford to dedicate more time to it, to take more hours off of work and spend them playing video games and writing and coming up with hopefully entertaining videos, the one thing I find myself saying more than ever is man, video games are just so cool. They're so awesome. I get to play so many really exciting games. I can even tell you that there's a couple of upcoming games that I've been playing that there will be reviews on for the channel that are an immense value and fantastic experiences that deserve to be supported. And there's games like that coming out every single day. And in a world where negativity tends to be what gets the most clicks, what gets the most views, what makes the most noise, I think it's equally important of all of us to not just talk about boycotting and saying what is wrong with the industry, but also championing and rewarding the people who are giving us what we want, to raise them up as examples of what we want other companies to do. There are so many great games, many of which I intend to talk about as soon as I can figure out like cool ways of presenting those games to you guys, that I've been having a blast with in the last just 3 months in new releases. Not to mention if we go back 2 years, or not to mention if we go back 30. Video games are amazing and they continue to be amazing pretty much every day. And I think we should reward those that are. The combination of those two things together is how we create an industry where great people get to make great games that we want to play, and they get money to make even more great games that we want to play. Games that respect us as customers, that respect us as people, that offer us something of value. And it's how we kick out of the industry practices that I think none of us want to see. If anything, I can tell you one thing that I find really interesting in all of this. Xbox kind of has a golden opportunity here to be the good guy again. Remember, competition is what keeps everybody else in check. That's what happened with the PS4 and the Xbox One. Times have changed, things are very different now, but if there is something that we want as customers, and if somebody can identify it, it will do well. It's just the nature of things. We've got a lot of great stuff to play, no need for Mario Kart World. So hey, if you're gonna go into the comment section of this video and say that Nintendo is stupid and you hate them for what they've done, I think that's great. We need to make our voices heard. I want them to hear that sort of stuff. I want them to change for the better. I want better consoles with better features that are better for customers to be made, and for better games to be made as well. But if you can add some positivity to whatever comment you put down there, recommend the game you really like or something like that, that would be extra appreciated. And speaking of appreciating, I appreciate you for watching this video all the way through. If you want more from me, including news, reviews, previews, and even retrospectives, as well as essays just like this one on the industry and games, consider subscribing. The reception and support that I've seen recently on the videos is crazy, and it's kind of hard to process it, to even process the idea of it, but I am incredibly thankful, and I take it as a responsibility to make the best videos possible every day. Speaking of which, the people who support me every single day are up on the wall. All of the patrons and members of the channel here on YouTube that support what I do every single day, and for which I am incredibly grateful. Thank you so very much for your support. I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching. Go out there, enjoy some great video games, and I'll see you again very soon.